Yeah, I hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, good morning. Yeah, so let's start. So in the previous classes, of course, we're able to get, I'm sure, class rep, I'm sure we got to this point in the last class, right? All right, so we're able to understand how we obtain our equivalence. So in the process of looking for a machine that is similar to the one that we are trying to find its equivalence, then it is important for us to put this in standard form too. So we're going to be looking at methods or how we can put it in standard form, or how we can put our equivalent table into standard form. So that's where we'll continue from today. So I'll be a little fast so that we'll be able to meet up. Today is the last class, and Dr. Sanagi will be taking over the next. So I want to be able to finish everything today. Now, how do we continue with? So when you get a question that says reduce the automaton given below, that means you have to check for inaccessible states. You have to do the reduction, the equivalence. That's you draw the table, draw the equivalence, do the equivalence. Then you remove duplicated states. Then you put it in standard form. So identifying states. So to identify two equivalent states, S and T, we select one of them, say S, to represent them both. Now, for instance, if you have a table, and on a table, so if you have a table, right, and on the table you have set of inputs, right? So here you have A, then maybe down the line, you have some maybe B and C. So what happens is that if after doing your equivalence, you find out that A has the same equivalence, let's say that this equivalence 5, this is 1, and this is also 1, and this is 0. Now you see that A and C have the same equivalence. So what we do is that in as much as you are coming to see A first, that you met A first before C. So A will take precedence. So A, we have to, A will be chosen and it will replace anything on C. So if you want to draw a new table, this column will be converted to A, will be changed to A because A has the same equivalence as this guy, as C. So that means A can do the job of C. So C will be replaced completely here, right? We'll replace C completely. And the input value here will also be what will be here. So anything pointing to C in this place, let's assume this place is C now, you have to change it to A, right? So that is the general process. We're going to be seeing it very soon in our example. So, example identifying state B and D. That's if you look at this diagram, the equivalent state we did earlier, when you look at this equivalence 5, and you look at equivalence 4 or fourth equivalence, you see that they are alike: 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 3, 3. So they are all the same in their columns, right? Now, what we now look out for is that which of these equivalents is the same. Now, if you look at this is 0. You look down, is there any other 0? No. Now, this is 1. There's another 1 here. So what will happen is that state B will replace, or will replace state D. So instead of having a table where you see D, you replace it with what? B. Now look at state these 2. There's no other 1. 3, no other 1. Now look at 4. So you have F, right? And you have G. So in as much as F is encountered first, right, what we do is that we replace everything that points to G with F. So this will be turned to F. So let's look at where it was drawn. So if you look at this new diagram, you see that you have A, B. Now you see that this B, you saw earlier, we saw, okay, let me just, we had that this was 0, right? This 1, right? This 2, this 1, right? Then this 3, right? 4, 4, right? Then 5 in the fifth equivalent. Are you following? Are you following?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. So you see that we said that this guy, B and D, had the same equivalence. So that means if you look at it generally, they should have the same input sets. Not that they should have it generally, but anything that now points to D in these places, all these places, right? They have to be changed to the first encounter. So okay. So now you see that instead of writing D here, right? We have replaced it with what? B. It should be D that was here before. So we have replaced it with what? P. Here, it should be G. F, G, yeah, it should be G. It should be G, but it has been replaced with F because F has value of what? 4. G has a value of 4, but we came across F first when we are coming down the columns, or when we are coming down the rows. We came across F first, so we replace everything that is pointing to G. We replace them with F. Now, let's go back up and look at the, when you go back, hello, can you see hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. So look at the initial table. Don't mind the red stuff on it. Look at the initial table. You have B, D, right? And we said that what? B has to replace D. So here, in the initial one, this has to be changed to what? B inside. Then this is B again. Yeah, this is D again. It will be changed to what? B. Anything pointing to D must be changed to what? B. That's when we want to convert it to standard form. Now look at F and G. So we change this to, okay, this will be changed to what? D, B. Now here, this maintains the side, then this is changed to what? F. So anything that we see in this place having G, we have to convert to F. So we'll go through again. This will be converted to F. This will be converted to F because the state G has been removed. So anything pointing to D or A or G will be replaced totally. And that's what has been done here. So going back to the main table, okay, so going back to this table, you can see, let me remove some of this. Yes, so going to this table, you see that everything D and, no, not this table, this table, everything D and G has been replaced appropriately. I just used that earlier diagram, which is the first state diagram we drew from the the state table we drew from the state diagram to replace this. Here was D before, so it has changed to B. Here was D, this place, okay, this was D before, that has changed to B. Here, D changed to B, and every other thing pointing to G has also been converted to F, right? Okay, so moving on. So the next thing we do is to remove the repetitive state. So you see A, B, C. Now, what do you notice? D, or the repeated B, has been removed. Then E, F. Then G, which is a repeated F, has also been removed. Then you don't forget to look at which of these states are accepting states, and you add them appropriately, right? So that is identifying the same states and removing them. And that's one of the processes in putting our stuff in standard form. The next thing to do is now putting it in standard form properly. Now, how do we do that? Please pay very close attention at this point. So a binary FSC with a transition function, I'm sure you should remember transition function, that you're at a state, right? When you receive a function, an input symbol, you transit to another state. So it's in standard form. One, if the states are labeled, look at, if the states are labeled from 0 to, and so forth, from 0 going on, now state 0 is the initial state. So you must identify which is the initial state. I'm sure you still remember this arrow, that any state it is pointing to is called what? The initial state. So if an entry in the table is greater than the maximum of those above it and to the left of it, it must be exactly one more than this maximum. So you see all these conditions being explained shortly. So in a nutshell, standard form means that states are labeled from 0 upwards in the order in which they are needed as you fill out the transition table row by row. So whenever a table needs a new label, it is always given the next available number. So how do we go about doing this? Now, let's look at a simple example. Now, example. Now, put the following FSC in standard form. Now, can you, or at least if you want to just unmute your mic so that we'll quickly get out of here quickly. Now, what is the initial state here?
F.
Good. So the initial state is F, right? That means F will be given the value of what? 0. Now, if you read the statements earlier here, so I'm just trying to explain, say, the states are labeled 0, 1, 2, 3, this. State 0 is the initial state. So F is going to be given the value of 0, right? So once we have identified that, the next thing we will do is to now check what is the transition of f using the transition function. So you have f, because you have identified as initial states. So what is our transition function? We have t. When you are at f and you receive an input 0, where do you move to? So where you move to will be the next number. So let's look at this table here. When you are at f, which is initial state, you receive a 0. Where do you move to?
A.
A, good. So A. So that means here now our A will be given the value of what? 1. So that is the numbering we were talking about earlier. So the next thing you consider is that you are still at F. You receive the value of 1. Where do you move to?
Same F.
You move to F. Good. So you move to F. But F has got what? Has been given the value of what? 0 initially. Do you get that now?
So
Good. So the next thing we are going to be doing is, after finishing with the initial states, right? The next thing, you go to the next row. Not the next row necessarily, but the next state that appears. So you have, for instance, the first thing you got across was what? F, right? Then the next thing under 0 is A, right? Then the next thing was F, but F is already here, so you cancel out this F. So what is the next state you are going to look at? You're going to be looking at state A as against state S, right? So let's now go to the table, so know how we'll fill up the table quickly. So here is the table. Now let's work with the table together. Can you see hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is our initial state?
F.
F is our initial state. And what did we give it? The value of what? 0.
0.
So that means here you put your 0 because F is the initial state. Then you now put F here to remember that, oh, you have assigned F to be equal to 0. So F assigned to what? 0. The next thing is now you now test from this state table here that, okay, when you are at 0, or when you are at F, which is your initial state, and you read a 0, where do you go to? You go to A, right? Are you following?
yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So you go to A. So A is now what? Your 1. So that's why 1 is here. A, which is in this table, has been given the value of 1. So you put A here, right? And you put the value of 1 here. That means A is being represented by 1. Now you are still at state F. You read the value of what? 1. Where do you go to? F, right? But F has already been given the value of 0, right? So you put 0 here. So there's nothing to put down here again. Why? Because you have not encountered any new state or any new alphabet. Now, remember that you have done this, you are through with this role, role now. So the next one is that, how do you determine what is the next alphabet to process? Now, if you look at this table, the next alphabet you are seeing on this table is what? A. So you start processing A. So you go to the row of A on this table, right? So this is A. When you are at 0 and you receive when you're at A, sorry, and you receive 0, where do you move to?
S.
S.
S. Good. So that means the next thing you're encountering is what? S. So S is giving the value of what? 2. So here you put what? 2, because it is S that you are processing here. Now you are at A, you read a 1. Where do you go to?
A.
A. But you know that A has been given the value of 1 before. So you put 1 here. So what is the next thing on the table here? On this table here is what? S. So you go to S here. So let's look at the value of S, the input combination of S. Now you're on S. You read a 0. Where do you go to?
Z.
Z.
Z. So Z is giving the value. So S has been given the value of what? 2. And Z will be given the value of what now? 3.
3.
Right? So you put Z here and you put 3 here. Now you at Z, you at S, you read a 0, you go to Z. So Z is what? 3. Right? Now you are still at S, you read a 1. Where do you go to? F. We already have a value of S, so put 0 here, right? So the next thing on the row here is what? Z. Now you come to Z. So upon reading A on Z, where do you go? Upon reading 0, sorry, when you are state Z and you read the 0, where do you go to?
A.
A. What's the value of A?
1.
1. Good. So put 1 here. Now you are at state Z, you read a 1. Where do you go to?
F.
F. Right? So F has been given the value of what?
0.
0.
So this is how you put your stuff in standard form generally. So do you understand how we went through it, the process of putting it in standard form?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So who said no? Do you understand what I've explained so far?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll move on. So don't also forget to bring along the accepting state. Yeah, please be quiet. A is the accepting state, right? And it comes with its accepting state from row 3 here to row 2. So this is how to put your stuff in standard form generally. And the process is what we have explained. All right. So the next, so let's look at what we read initially so that we can be sure that, okay, it's not it. Here. We said the binary state with transition function, this is in standard form if it obeys this. The states are labeled 0, 1, 2, 3. Is that one disturbing my class? So we have the states. The states are labeled 0, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you understand when we say the states are labeled 1, 2, 3, what it means?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that is what we have just explained. Then states 0 is initial state. You understand that now. Then in any entry in the table, no, if any entry in the table is greater than the maximum of those above and to the left of it, it must be exactly one more than this maximum. Now, if you look at the diagram generally, you see that this this table, right, shows that this is 1, 0, 1, 2, 2, 3. So it's just one higher than it. So the test, the simple test of your destiny is, okay, you look at left and right, up and down. The difference must be at least 1. Look at 1, 0, it fulfills the law. 1, 2 fulfills the law, right? Now, look at this row column. You have 3, 0, but 2, 3 obeys that law. 1, 0. So at least one of this row or column must obey the law just beside it or above it. So that is said to have been put in standard form generally. So that is all the English we are reading since, and that's what we have done with the example. Right. So the next thing we're going to be looking at, of course, we have seen how we can find the equivalence of irregular FSA, right? So the next thing we want to look at is how do we find the equivalence of a milli machine and a more machine. So it's similar to what we have done in previous classes. So I'll just look at what is the difference in this area. Now, the example is to reduce the milli machine. Of course, I should believe that I should be able to draw this table, right? Can you still remember how to draw? Do you still remember how to draw this table?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So now the only difference in finding the equivalence is what I'm going to run you through quickly so that you just understand what the difference is. Now, how do you get the zeroth equivalence for milli machine? Now, for FSA, that's a finite state machine, you know that all those with asterisks, right, are given the value of what? Given the value of what? 0. But it is different
0
for this milli machine. What you do is that, you know, we say that those with 1, they are the what? Accepting states, right? So also, you look at this. This is the output session. These two sessions, they are the output session of the milli machine. So what you do is this: you look at the pattern formed by this, all this, right? And you look at any repetition. You give them numbers starting from what? 0. So let's start. So when you look at these two combinations, 1, 0. Here, you give it the value of 0 for 0 to equivalence, because that's the first pattern you are coming across. So you look down the columns again. Are there any combination in these two rows, in these two columns? Yes, we have 1, 0 again. So you give it 0 here. You have 1, 0 here. You give it the value of 0, right? So look at this other one. It just 0, 0, which is different from what you have. You give it 1. So that is the only difference to get the 0th equivalence, right? So the next thing you do is you now say, okay, now that I've gotten my 0th, yeah, can you see me?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you now, sir. I can no
Get off
longer
now in
hear
the
you,
class. You're
sir.
disturbing my internet service. Yeah, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yeah, sorry, one strange call just disturbed my connectivity. Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, somebody is just disturbing my line with useless calls. Sorry about that. So we have this. So when you have gotten your 0th equivalence, you remember that I said you draw out another line where you have A, B, C, D, and the values are assigned to what? This A. So you have 0, B will take value of what? 0, C will take the value of what? 1, D will take the value of what? 0. Do you still understand that in previous equivalence?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what we now do is now you now use that to generate the next set of inputs, these two inputs. So here you have A to be what? B and C. So what is B now? B is 0 and C is what? Having the value of 1. B here is what? 0. D here is what? 0. C is 1. A is 0. B is 0. C is 1. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
you find the next equivalence, you look at these 3 now, right? Instead of the 2 now, you look at the 3 to find this equivalence. When you generate this, you look at this to find these 3 to find the others. Yes. So that is how, that's only difference. The only difference is in generating the initial zeroth equivalence. Now, the other step still follows, right? That how do you generate the standard form? It's still the same. You look at those who have this that have similar those that, okay, for instance, look at this guy. What is similar? Just what? A and D. So because A comes first, D we have to go, right? So this is what has been done here. D is gone. Then you can put it in standard form by labeling it 0, 1, 2, right? And you continue in that direction. So how do we find the equivalence for a more machine? Now, you know that more machine has its outputs in this more machine has its output here. So all you need to do is just to put, sorry. Now this is the, let me put it now. This is the output, right? So the output of a more machine for that column is the what? The zeroth equivalence. So you don't need to do any pattern. So this is the pattern already. X is a pattern. Y is a pattern on its own. So this in itself is the zeroth equivalence. So you look at it, looks strange, right? All you need to do is that you have put the output here as zeroth equivalence. So what you do, you assign X to A, Y to B, Y to Z, and no, say Y to Z, Y to C, the X to D. So used to generate the next set of inputs, right? So once you have done that, you now look at this pattern again to form this, and this. In this way, these 3, you join them together to form a new pattern. So if you look at, let me clean it up. Now, if you look at the first one, X, Y, Y is 0. When you look down, X, Y, Y assigned 0. The next one you come across is Y, Y, X, which is this, Y, Y, X. So you can see. So as against going with X and Y again, so what you do is that you now assign the value of this to generate this next set, right? So but as you are looking at your equivalence, you'll be checking, are they the same? Is this previous one the same with this? If it is not, you continue to this. So when you look at this and this, you find out that they are the same generally. So that is how to find equivalence for a more machine. And the following is how to generate it to what? To remove the repetitive states. And this is how to put it in standard form. So if you are told to find a machine that can do the same function as another machine, what it means that you have to first of all check for inaccessible states. The next one, you do the equivalence. Then the next one, you remove repetitive states. Then the next one, you put it in standard form. And that is what is called equivalence and reduction. Yeah. So do we have any question?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, sir. I have a question, sir.
Okay.
So for the more machines, you said the output, the output is the equivalence
It's
for the
zeroth equivalent.
zeroth equivalence. So
Yes.
now, after getting the first equivalence, is it the one equivalence? You said you assign the values to the states.
Now, you see, for the zeroth equivalence, if you want to generate this set, right? You say X is assigned to this. y assigned to this. So once you are done with this area, the next thing is that once you get the first equivalence now, instead of using these values here to take the value of A, B, C, this 0 now takes the value of what? A. 1 takes what? B. This takes C, and this takes what? D. So that's what you use to generate this next set. Do you understand?
Yes, I do know. Thank you, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other questions? Questions? None. All right. So in the absence of no questions, we'll go to the last class. The last slide. Sorry. Oh boy. Okay. All right. So we hope we'll be able to get to. Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So we want to look at non-deterministic finite state machine, right? So we want to see how we can, what is a non-deterministic machine? What we have been dealing with so far are deterministic finite state machine. That means you could predict where it will go from one point to the other. Now you see, if you are in state A, right? You know that once you pick up maybe an input, let's say you pick up a 0, you know that maybe you have to go to another state B, right? Maybe you have another state C here, and you pick up a 1, you go to this state. So it is determined. But what if you have another state 1 going to another state D? That means, are you going to be throwing a die to know where you're supposed to go to from here? So this is is non-deterministic. So it's generally, it looks confusing, but they are a good computer model for parallel computation. Now, up until this model was developed, I think some years back, maybe 99 or 2000, you could not open 2 applications on the system. And this becomes very boring. So if you want to open another application, another form, you have to close one before you open the other, as against opening about 100 maybe pages on your system now. So this non-deterministic machine has brought us out of that quagmire to this particular point. So let's introduce ourselves to what non-deterministic machines are, and some of the properties, and how we can convert them to deterministic finite state automaton. All right. So non-determinism. Non-determinism is a useful concept that has had great impact on the theory of computation. So far in our discussion, we have looked at only a unique way of following from previous steps to the other. So in state A, you can move to state B or state D upon the receipt of an input function. But when the machine in a given state and reads the next input, we know that the next state it will go will be well defined, and we know that. So this is a deterministic or a determined movement. And remember, we said that automaton is a self-propelling machine. That means upon the receipt of an input symbol, it propels itself to another state, right? Just like you're in we're 100 level, upon passing some exams, you self-propel yourself to what? 200 level. The same, when you pass, you move to 300 level. Now imagine there's a kind of condition that how you graduate is not fashioned that way, that you can take a course, maybe when you just get admission, you can take a course in 500 level, you go to 300 level, go to 200 level, haphazardly. There are no pre-ordered way. So that's a non-deterministic way. So in a non-deterministic machine, several choices may exist for the next state at any point. Now, non-determinism is a generalization of determinism. So every deterministic finite automaton is automatically a non-deterministic finite state automaton. Now, look at this diagram. Now, what you observe is that this is the initial state from our previous experiences. Now, excuse me, you see that this is generally allowed, where you have upon the receipt of 0, you remain in Q1. Upon the receipt of 1, you remain in Q1. But something is strange. You have this having 1, and you have another guy running out of here as 1. So which of these 1 do we pick when we read from a set of symbols and we read 1? Which of these do we remain here, or do we move to state 2? Now, if you look at this state 2, from state Q2, you receive a 0, right? You move to Q3. Now, for deterministic finite state automaton, it is said that the input symbols should be what we define the language that this automaton can accept. But here we are seeing another symbol being introduced, which is not part of 0 and 1, right? So we're going to be explaining why this should be here. So, and a host of other things. That is what makes this diagram non-deterministic. It has 2 states coming out from here. It has, it deviates from the rule of having the input symbols to define the language to be accepted by that automaton, and a host of other things that defiles normal deterministic automaton, right? So let's look at the note following. So the difference between a deterministic finite automaton abbreviated as DFA, so we'll be using DFA and NFA, and a non-deterministic finite state automaton abbreviated as NFA is immediately apparent. First, every state of a DFA always has exactly one exiting arrow from each symbol in the alphabet. The non-deterministic automaton shown in the figure above violate this rule. And what are the rules? State 1, that's state Q1, which is the initial state, has one exiting arrow for 0, but it has 2 for 1. Q2 has an arrow for 0, but it has none for 1, right? Now, in an NFA, a state may have 0, 1, or more exiting arrow from each alphabet. Second, in a DFA, labels of the transition arrow and labels of the transition arrows are symbols from that alphabet. That's for deterministic. This NFA has an arrow with a label of an empty set. In general, an NFA may have arrows labeled with members of the alphabet or empty sets. So 0, 1, or many arrows may exit from each state with the label empty sets, right? So you can see the major difference. So if you have to differentiate between a DFA and an NFA, you should be able to do that. So how does an NFA compute? How does it work, right? That's what we want to look at quickly. Now, suppose that we are running an NFA on an input string and comes to a state with multiple ways to proceed. For example, say that we are in state Q1, which is the initial state in the NFA, in the figure above, and that the next input symbol is a 1, how does it work? Now, after reading that symbol, right, the machine splits. Now, we're going to be looking at how the splitting occurs. The machine splits into multiple, the machine splits into multiple copies of itself and follows the possibilities in parallel. Don't worry, we're going to look at an example to illustrate that. Now, each of the machine takes one of the possible ways to proceed and continues as before. Now, if there are subsequent choices, the machine splits again, right? So if you read 1, you can split. Under this one again, you can split further. If it's 3, any of it, you can split. That's what it is saying, just like a tree, right? So if the next input symbol doesn't appear on any of the arrow exiting the state occupied by the copy of the machine, that copy of the machine dies. So what it's saying is that maybe you are at this state, you read, so you can split. If it has an empty set, then if you get here, you can split further. Maybe you get to another state, you can split further. Now, if you are supposed to read an input set on this level, but the input doesn't permit you to, doesn't allow you to read or to move from this state. That means the state that doesn't allow you to read, let's assume that you can only move to the next state from here, right? And this, you cannot move out of this state. So this state dies. If you cannot move from this state dies. Now, let's assume that there's no other thing that can be read from here. This state also dies. That's what it's explaining. Now, finally, if any of these copies of the machine is in an accept state, that means if it's able to reach the end, at the end of the input. So when you process all the input and it gets to the end, and we say that that NFA accepts the string of language processed by it, right? So if a state with, now please pay close attention here, I'm still going to explain, but if a state with a symbol, which is the empty state, on an exiting arrow is encountered, something similar happens. Now, look at, without reading anything, that means if you are in a state and you have, let's say, empty state, which is represented by lambda, right? Let's say this is state A, and this is state B, and this is state C. State C, and there is a lambda here, and there's a 1 here. Now, if, for instance, at this state A, you want to process 1, that's you want to take an input of 1. Now, remember, this is state A. There's no exiting arrow from here that has a label of 1, right? But you want to process a 1. How do you go about it? Now, I said, without reading any inputs at all, the machine splits into multiple copies, one following each of the exiting E-labeled arrow, and one staying at the current state. Then the machine proceeds non-deterministically. That means if you want to process a 1 and you are here and you just have an empty string, you can move from this A to B, not that without reading anything, then process your 1 from B to C. Just put that at the back of your mind, just for information. We're going to see how it operates. Now, now non-determinism may be viewed as a kind of parallel computation, wherein multiple independent processes and threads can be running concurrently. So this is a great solution or a great breakthrough in science, as it were. So when the NFA splits to follow several choices, that corresponds to a process that's forking into several children, each proceeding separately on its own way. So if at least one of these processes accepts, that means it gets to the end or gets to the final state, then the entire computation accepts. Another way to think of deterministic computation is as of a tree of possibilities. Now, the root of the tree corresponds to the start of the computation. Every branching point in the tree corresponds to a point in the computation at which the machine has multiple choices, right? These are just the introductory aspects. So this is what it means for deterministic. You have that once you read from a point, you read maybe 1, you move to another point, you read another thing, 0, you move to another point, and you can determine where next to go. However, for non-determinism, when you read from this point, you can either split into 2 children, right? And you continue. Then once you read here again, you can continue to move. Then if there's nothing for you to move out of this state, then this whole set dies. But here, you could have something that could move you to another state. Now, this guy dies. This guy continues. This guy is dead. This guy continues. This guy is dead. This guy continues like that up until it gets to the end states. So we're going to be looking at an example to buttress what we have said so far. So example, now given this diagram, we are asked to run the following input string, right? So the input string is what? 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0 through the NFA represented in the figure below. Now, this is the figure represented. Now, just as our initial figure given N1, right? So I just brought everything together. This is the input string we are supposed to read. This is the diagram. Now, this is how it is done. So please pay close attention here so that once you get it once and for all, it becomes easy for you to do any similar passing. Now, so this is what, can you see the input string you're supposed to pass?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, can you still see this diagram? Is it clear enough?
Yes, sir, it is.
Oh, great. So this is 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. We want to read this. We want to see how this works. So here, you will draw your start state, which is from this table, which from this diagram is what? Q1, right? Now, the first thing you will read is what? 0. Now, look at 0. Where does 0 take you to on this diagram?
U1.
So you read 0. This is, sorry, let me clean it clear so that you will start again. You will see what I want you to understand. Okay, so let's look at it again. So you are at Q1. So don't mind my drawing. This is Q1, right? Which is the initial state. You are to read what? 0. You can see I'm putting the read on the arrow. You read is 0. But if you look at this guy, when you read is 0, where do you go to? You go to Q1. So you draw another state. This is Q1. So you have processed what? The first symbol. So now you are still at Q1. You are at this state now. You are at Q1. You read what? A 1. So when you read the next input symbol, now let's look at the diagram. The next input symbol takes you to where?
Q2, sir.
It takes you to where?
And takes you to Q1 and Q2.
It takes you to where? Q2.
Q1. Yeah.
Do you understand that? So let's look at it. It takes you to where? Q1. It takes you to another place called what? Q2. But you can see here, you have Q3. Why? Now, you remember I told you that without reading anything, this, in as much as you have gotten to this point with 1, and you have an empty set, which is a lambda, It just as you have if you are pouring water through a funnel and it gets to a state and it sees that there's space here, it will just continue to go until it sees something blocking it. So let's assume that you pour water here. It sees a space. It sees a channel which you have created for it. But here, it is just, oh, this is a freeway. Nothing is blocking me. It can still continue to go. So because you have read a 1 and it has taken you to Q2, and on Q2, you have a lambda, which can still take you to Q3. Now, let's assume that here again, you have a lambda. That means you still have to break it up into Q4. So here, because you have a lambda, you take it to where? Q3. So that's why I explained the other time. I just make a mental note of. Okay, David, you can speak. Yes, can see your hand up.
Okay, sir. Well, I would have thought that the lambda that for the Q3 will be under Q2, not under Q1, since it's directly under Q2. So it shouldn't be under the Q2.
I didn't get your question.
Like the lambda is under Q2, that is going to Q3.
Yes, it's exiting from, yes. I just explained that now. That
yes.
If you are, okay, let's assume that you have a funnel and you want to fill up a jar. Okay, let me clean it. Let's assume you have this jar, this big bucket, right? And you have a funnel to fill it up. So you are pouring water from this funnel and it's trickling down into this bucket, right? Let's assume that there is a hole on this place, and there's another bucket here. Now, as you are pouring water here, it goes this the way you are going, which is what? Your Q2. But because there is a hole, which is our lambda, it continues to flow into the next bucket, which is what? Q3. So that's why in the law of non-determinism said, once you have an empty set, which is this, you can move without reading anything. That's why I told you earlier that you take it. Okay, let me just take you to where that is. So, yeah. Okay, look at here. The NFA has an arrow with the label empty set. In general, an NFA may have arrows labeled with members of the alphabet of empty set 0, 1, or many arrows may exit from each of the states with the label. Okay, first, okay, different thing. It's not this place. Okay, so very simple. I'm trying to look for it. Suppose that after running the NFA, okay, each copy of the machine takes the possible way and continue as before. If there are subsequent choices, the machine splits again. Now, if the next input symbol doesn't appear on any of the arrows exiting the states occupied by a copy of the machine, that copy of the machine dies along with this. Okay. Finally, if any of these, no, it's not it. Okay, so if a state with an empty symbol on it, on an exiting arrow is encountered. Now listen, something similar happens. Without reading any input, the machine splits into multiple copies, one following each of the exiting label of where the empty labeled arrow, and let me see, the others. This thing is blocking me and I don't want to claim. Staying at the current state. Now, the machine proceeds non-deterministically as before. So that means without reading anything at all, without reading anything, this empty, Q1, which has read a 1, this is Q1, it has read a 1, it can move from where? To Q1, it can move to Q2, and without reading anything, because there's an empty set symbol here, it can also move to Q3. Now, let's assume that here again, we have an empty symbol again. It can also move to where? Q4 without reading anything. So let's assume that on this guy again, there's another hole. It can still move to another state called what? Q4. Do you understand now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's stated. So here you are now at where? Q1. So you know how we got up to this point. So you are now here, you are done with this guy. So the next thing you are reading is what? 0. When you read a 0 at Q1, where do you go to?
Q1.
Oh no, Q2.
You go to
Q1.
Q1. So you remember that this guy had to split. So we also test the input again on this guy too. So at Q2, you read a 1. Where do you go to? Oh, sorry, you read a 0. Where do you go to? You read a 0 here. You go to where? Q3. Hello? Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, sir.
network.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Can you see hear me?
Yes,
yes,
sir.
sir. I can hear you, sir.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was logged out. So Q2 up to this point, that's when you're at Q2, you read this 0. Where does it take you to? Q3. However, when you're at Q3, there's nothing taking you out of here with a 0. So this guy dies automatically. So you don't proceed with this guy. So that's what you call that this dies off. So there's nothing to process this further. So we remove it out of the equation. So you have processed for the value of what? 0. The next input what is what? 1. So you read a 1 here, which is here. When you're at Q1, when you read a 1, where do you go to? You go to Q1, Q2, and you remember again, because of the empty set, the lambda here, we move to Q3 again, right? So now at Q3, you read a 1. Where does it take you to? It takes you to what? Q4. So we are done with this set. Then we go further again. We read the next input symbol, which is 1. This is Q1. When you're at Q1, it splits as usual to these 3. When you're at Q2 and you read a 1, there's no way you're going. So this guy dies. When you're at Q3, you read a 1, it takes you where? Q4. When you're at Q4, you read a 1, it makes you stay at Q4. So we are done with this guy now. The next one is to read a 0. Now, you read a 0. At Q1, it takes you to Q1. At Q2, it takes you to Q3. At Q3, it dies. At Q4, it takes you to Q4. At Q4, it takes you to Q4. So at the end of the splitting and breaking, only these guys were able to arrive at the accepting state from the diagram. You can see Q4 is the accepting state, right? I can hear you. Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
So do you understand how it can split? And okay, now let me go back to what I said earlier on, that if, for instance, you are here, you are at Q1, and you read a 1, it will take you to where? Q1. It will take you to where? Q2. Now, now you see that there's a lambda here. Let's assume that here we have another empty set. So what happens is that if you read the 1 from here, it can take you to where? From Q1. From Q1, it's remains at Q1. From Q2, it remains at Q2. Then it can take you without reading anything to what? Q3 and also Q4. So I can decide to remove this, maybe put 1 comma lambda to test if you will be able to know that you can move non-deterministically to where you get to Q4, right? So you should understand that if you see an empty set or a lambda, it means you can move non-deterministically to the next set as long as you continue to. So if after Q4, you have another state and you have lambda again, you can move again from that Q1. So that is the functioning of the general splitting function working of this non-deterministic finite state automaton. That's how it processes things. So formal definition, you have the non-deterministic finite state automaton is a 5-tuple, just like a finite state automaton. The only thing that differs is the transition function, right? Which is that the set of states upon the receipt of the set of symbols and empty sets, you can move to another state P, which is a subset of Q. Any of the states of Q. That means you can move from Q1 and you read a 1, you move to Q2, and without reading anything, you can move to other states. So this is the only difference in the formal definition of a non-deterministic finite state automaton and a finite state automaton. And sure, you know what F is a finite state. You know what Q naught is the initial state. You know what Q is a set of states. You know what E is a finite set of alphabet or symbol, right? So that is that. What time is it now?
118.
Is one almost
Huh? Almost what?
120?
Oh, okay. So we still have a bit of time. All right. So we still want to continue in the look at the characteristics of finite state automaton. The non-deterministic finite state automaton. So we have what you call multiple states. So what do we call multiple states? Or multiple transitions, sorry. So do you notice anything peculiar about this following FSC, right? You notice that 2 arrows are exiting from A, and they have the value of what? 1. You can see this guy here exiting, this guy here exiting, right? Now, this is not a mistake as it were. It is just a representation of a non-deterministic finite state automaton. So there seemed to be a mistake before, because there seems to be 2 transition labeled 1 coming out of A. Now, if we are in state A and we read a 1, we go to state C or we go to state D. Now, we appear to have a choice. Does this mean we have to toss a coin so that sometimes we go to C, but on other occasion, with the same input string, do we go to D? Those are the questions that may be rising in our mind. Now, there's no mistake afterwards. This is an example of what is known as a non-deterministic FSA. It appears to incorporate the element of chance, but what possible use could there be for a machine with such unpredictable behavior, right? So what do you use all this on? So let us ask what strings. So we want to see, okay, what string can this FSA accept? First, we have to modify our definition of the accept state or the final state. A string is accepted by a non-deterministic FSA if it is possible to terminate at the accept state. Now, remember this diagram. So that means irrespective of if 2 of them were not accepted, they didn't get to the final state here, these 2, you can still have other children split out of it that can get to the final state. Just like parents, they have several children, right? You could have male children and female children. Now, you know that female children will marry out of the family and get other names, but you will still have maybe male children who could bear your name and preserve your name. Now, however, you can know that these days, women also have to bear, can still bear their father's name now to preserve their heritage. So it is said to be accepted if it gets to at the accept state from all the breaking, at least it reach the final state. That is what that statement is saying, that a string is accepted by a non-deterministic FSA if it is possible to terminate at an accepting state. Now, it's not just terminating at just any accepting state. It has done a lot of splitting while doing computation until it arrives at the accepted with one of its legs, at least it got to the final state. Other things that you should also look at is in multiple is the null transition. Now we're still going to reiterate what we encountered the other time. Now having multiple transition for the same input, it is not the only way an FSA can be non-deterministic. It can have null transition. Now consider the following FSA. Now note the two transitions coming out of state A. Note the two transitions coming out of state A. No, we are not forgetting to write the input character that produce the transition from A to D. Now, if you look at A, this guy is going to where? B. But here, nothing is written, right? So this is an example of where we can put an empty set, which is lambda, or represent it with this. Now, it is a null transition. So instead of calling it empty, whatever, we call it a null transition. So null transition can be represented by a lambda or by this that looks like an epsilon, right? Okay, now it can be made spontaneously without reading any input. You can see it's coming again. That means if you read a 1 here, you can either go to state B, or without reading anything, you go to state D, and using your 1, you now go to state F. That is the only danger that you should look out for when processing some of these things, right? So please start sending in your name quickly, your name, your matric number, and it must tally with what you have, what your login details are. Okay, so and you should also pay attention as you are writing your name. So, however, the danger of using an arrow without a label to represent, so we have 56 names. So if you have more than that, and all of you are seen to be absent. Now, however, the danger of using an arrow without a label to represent a null transition is that if we forget to label an arrow, it will be interpreted wrongly. So to avoid this, we use the null string symbol, which is the lambda here. Now, to represent a null transition, then if we come across an unlabeled arrow, we know that somebody has simply forgotten to label it. So the first diagram is incomplete and should be drawn as this second diagram. So you can see this lambda has been introduced here to show that it is not that we refuse to put, it is simply that a lambda should be here. Instead of thinking, no, it should be 0. No, it's just a non-deterministic automaton. All right, so going forward, another thing is multiple initial states. Now, another fine thing about NFE is that it will allow you to have multiple initial states. So you can decide to go any route. So the non-deterministic machine offers a choice where to start. It accepts the string 111 and those such as 101. So you could just start if you have set of input string. The first one, maybe the first one can take you from the initial state with 0, and second one offers an opportunity to go from the initial state with 1. So you can choose from which of this angle do I get into the machine. So by starting at A, it also accepts the string as 11. So if you look at A, you have 1, 1 or 1, 0, right? By starting at E, the language as accepted by the machine is, look at E. It can accept 1, it will lead to F. Another 1, it will lead to G, right? If you take another one, where does it take you to from E? No. Look at this language. Let me highlight. Sorry. This language. Yeah, we'll see. Except we are still expecting about 10 names. Now somebody just joined. So look at the one I highlighted here. Now, if you start at A, you could have, look at 111. So you could have, let me put my, you could have 1, 1, 1. So it can accept that. It could also accept 1, which is this. It could accept 0, right? So that is how you can get through A. So this point can accept A. So for state B, for entering through E, you could use 1, 1. So you could get into 1, 1, 0. So you could have 1, then 1, 0 as an entry point, and any other combination of 1. So having seen that there may be some merit in being allowed to design non-deterministic machine, provided there is a routine way of converting them to deterministic one. So let's start thinking of how we can change a non-deterministic machine to a deterministic one. So it is a very, very long step, very cumbersome, but easy to understand if you pay close attention. So let's look at the process of converting. Now, the first one is completing the null, right? Just as we have said that if there is no, what's the name? If you omit something on a lambda, like if you omit transition and there's no label on that arrow for transition, then it's not that we have made a mistake. It is just that we have a lambda that should have been introduced, right? So that is that. Now, completing the null. If there is a sequence of null transition from state A to state B, now it is easy for us to add a direct null transition from A to B unless there is already one. We then say that the NFA is complete, right? So you have A and you have, this is state A. Let me choose my listing again. This is state A. This is state, let's say this is state B. So we could have, because we have lambda here and lambda here, so it's safe for us to say that we can move from A, non-determined, without reading anything, to B. So that's what I was explaining the other time. So you can get from A, let's say that this is another one, C. So you can move from A, you pass through C, but because there is another lambda, then you can get to C easily. Yeah, I still expect 5 names. Okay. So strictly speaking, there is a sequence of null from each state to itself, a sequence of length of 0. And so we ought to introduce a null from each state to itself. However, this would cluster up the diagrams too much. And so we merely remember that there is an invisible null from each state to itself. Then completing the null in the above non-deterministic finite state automator, we get this. So, but when we use working with the state diagram, we make it very cumbersome. So it's better that we use tables, which will make it quite easy for us. Now, example, say complete the null for the following non-deterministic finite state automaton. So you could also call it NFA, but for you to understand that, okay, non-deterministic, this one, non-deterministic finite state automaton. So you can just say NFA, right? For short. Now look at this diagram. You see that the concept of lambda has been introduced as against just 0 and 1 that we are used to, because this is an empty set that you could just read non-deterministically without thinking, right? So how do you go about completing the null? You know, we are looking at the concept of completing the null. Say complete the nulls for the following NFA. This is the table we have been given. Now you are state A, you get a 0, you go to B, you get a 1, you go to where? A, but you are still at A. You could also read lambda and go to B. You could read an empty set and go to D. So I'm sure you should be able to draw the diagram for this NFA, right? So assignment, draw the state diagram for the NFA shown in the figure on the screen. Have you written that down?
Yes, sir.
All right, so class rep, we expect that everybody will submit by 12 midnight today. So what you do is that you write your name, your matric number on a sheet of paper, you sign, you do the assignment, you scan it, and you send to your class. No, don't even send it to your class rep, you send it to me. So that if I don't get your response by 12 today, you have 0. So send it to my mail address. Class rep, you have my mail address?
No, sir.
Ah, okay. I will send my mail address to you, so you send it to the class, to the group. So just remind me.
Okay,
So
sir.
by 12 this night, if you don't turn in your assignment, you have 0. And for those who are not in class, they are not entitled to write the assignments. So they have 0 for the test. So how do we now go about this? Now you remember how we do removing inaccessible states in NFAs, where we choose the first, the initial state, we look at the input, we underline the ones that we have done like that. That is the same principle, but what the difference is that you'll be looking at the lambda, under lambda, and the first initial state, the first lambda, that's the first value of lambda. For instance, here is A, which is the initial state, and it has values for lambda. Now, if it doesn't have values for lambda, you are going to skip it to the next one that has value of lambda. So let's look at how this is done quickly. Now, for the first row here, we have shaded the non-law portion of the table, as that information is not needed for this stage. So what you do is that you write down A, just as we did in removing inaccessible states. Now read up the fact that there are null from A to B, D. So you can see this is A. This is A. It has values from where? To B, D. So you write your A. So all you are considering is this row. So it has values from where? B, D, right? So you have done A, you underline A. The next one is what? A, B, D. So you want to process B now, right? So you see that B has stuff to where? F, right? Are you following? Well, have I been logged out? Hello?
Yes,
So
sir.
is it okay? Yes, I will follow you.
Okay, you'll be looking at this column. That's all you'll be looking at. Just forget these guys. We have put them in black, so we are not considering them for completing the null. So the next state is that you have A, B, D, F, right? So this is A, you have done A, you have done B. Now the next one is D. This is D. D has a pointer to where? A, right? But you already have A, which is this one. So you remove that A, right? So you still have F. The next one is what? A, B, D, F. So you want to process F now. So what is F? F is pointing to where? B and E, right? But you already have what? B. So what you have eventually is what? A, B, D, F, and E. So look at E now. E has nothing in lambda. So we have finished processing for the initial state of A, right? So that's what, oh boy, sorry, I'm a bit tired. I've been talking for how many hours now? Okay. Close. Yeah, did you follow what I've just done now? So what I've just done is this. So write down A, you read off the fact that there is a node from A to BD, right? So this is it. You have your A and BD. You have processed A, and so you bring this one out. That's what I've just explained. F, you look at what F D has, you continue F, you put it aside as for A. That's that A, which has a column or a feedback on the empty set. Okay, so let's go forward to, so you understand this, do you understand this process? Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Do you get this process now?
Yes.
Okay, so please respond though, else I'll just keep and assume that you understand. So the next one, so having done all that, so this is the first aspect. So you have A, you write down A, you look through on the lambda table, which is on that initial table, on this table here. You look at A, this is BD, right? Here, which is BD. So you process the value of A, you bring out this BD here, right? Having done that, you move to the next A, P, D. So the next one you're processing is what? B, and B on the table has F under the lambda, you bring it out. Then the next one you process for D, D has what? D has what? It has A, because A has existed before, there's no need. The next one you're processing is F. F has what? BE. You have B already, so you put the B. Then you look at E. E has nothing, so you end there. So B, if you look at table B, if you look at B, this is B, right? What does B have under lambda? This is B. It has F under lambda. So you write B, right? Which produces what? BF, right? So here you have process B. So under F, F has what? BE. So you have BE. Because you have a B already, so you have BFE, right? So under E, there's nothing. So you are done with this guy too. So here you have BF, BFE. C has nothing to represent it for, this is C. It has no representation of, lambda. So it becomes empty, right? So the next one is what? D. D has A. So when you write D and you write A, then A has what? B, D. But because there's a D already, so you remove this D. Then the next one is what? B. B has F, right? Then F has B, E. So there's B, you write E, right? So E has nothing. So you are done with that. I hope you understand the process of arriving at that. Just like removing inaccessible states. Then E has nothing, and it goes on like that. So what are you now going to do with all these things you have done? So This is exactly the same procedure that we use to find inaccessible states or accessible states. The only difference are that we only follow the null transition. So it is the null transition column that you follow. Then we begin at each state that has, we process the one that has the states for the lambda column. So having done that, so we record the information in the lambda column of the transition table. However, as explained above, we omit the state itself. So instead of recording FBE, we record BE. So this is what we have done here. We have A, B, D, E, F. You can see this has changed completely from what we had in the initial table. So that is what we call completing the null. You can see here, we had BD, right? But it has changed to what? BDE here because of the calculation we did, right? So it continues. The next one, B, this one has nothing. This one, A, B, F, E. Then this one is BE, and it goes on and on like that. So that is what is called completing the null method. Do you understand how we got here?
Yes, sir.
Last rep.
Yes, sir.
Oh, you are sleeping.
So I don't understand how it got there. So
What is it that you don't understand? Hello? Who just talked? Which aspect is that or you don't understand the whole class? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
We can hear you, sir.
Let me continue. So the next thing is removing the null. All right. So having done completing the null, then the next thing is removing the null. Now consider the following complete non-deterministic finite state automata. So try to remove the null. So what do? You draw the diagram. Now I'm sure you should be able to draw the diagram for this. So let's just see how to draw the diagram together. So how many states do we have?
6.
Okay, so how many accepting states do we have?
2.
How many accepting states do we have?
2.
2.
2. And what is it? What are they?
C and E.
Yeah,
E and
C.
E.
Good. What is the initial state?
A.
So
A.
how many input symbols do we have?
3.
3.
And what are they?
3.
1 and null.
So 0, 1, and null. Those are the inputs. So you have been able to interpret that by yourself. So the next thing we want to look at is, okay, how do we now draw that diagram at the state table for this? So look at, this is what it is. So let me move this one to the previous distance so we can look at it together. So yes, can you see the state table and the state diagram?
Yes, sir.
So you now have the states. These are the states. Of course, you'll be able to do this by yourself. Writing out the states, you'll be able to identify the initial states, then the input symbol, which are what? 0, 1, and lambda. I hope you understand that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now you see that when you are state A, you receive a 1. Where does it take you to? It takes you to a B. So under 1, you put a B, and this is the B that is here now, right? But there's no other thing under 0 and under lambda taking you out of A. So what happens? They are empty, and this is why this place is empty, and this place is also empty. Yeah, who is that fellow disturbing my class? Who is this off from Michael, or what's the name? All right. Can you see me, please?
Yes, sir.
All right. So do you understand how we came about this first A?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. Okay, so let me clear. So the next thing is, okay, how do we now go about the next one? So you are now on state B. Now pay close attention to how we read B so that it will be quite easy for you. Now you are at state B, you read a 0. Where do you go to?
E.
So this is where you have your E. Now you are at state B, you read a lambda. Where does it take you to?
E and D.
Yeah?
C and D.
So this is one taking you to C, and this other guy is taking you to B. So that's why you have C and D here. However, remember that you have read, let me clear, you have read a lambda from B to C. Now, without reading anything, do you know you can still go to D? Because there is a lambda here again, but that is not for this class. But for the fact that there is another lambda that can make you go straight, you can represent as C and D. Let's assume that this place is E. So it will be what? B, it will be what? C and E. So there's no need to say, okay, you are going non-deterministically to this next one. No, it doesn't apply to this place. But we're going to see why it is important to take note of all these lambdas that are just following themselves, right? Now, the next one is C. Now, if you look at this state C, when you read a lambda takes to where? D. So that's where we have this. Then, where's the other one? The other one takes you to B. So I'm sure you should be able to read you should be able to translate the table by yourself now. You should be able to transform the diagram to state table. Can you do that by yourself now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So the next thing we are looking at is we look across, So we look across the table. Now, what did they say we should do? Look at the question. The question says, what is that question, sir? Okay, removing the null. That's what we are told to do. We are told to remove the null for this NFA. So the first thing is to what? Draw the state table. And I want to assume that you all know how to draw the table now from what I've just explained. Can you draw the diagram by yourself now, or the state table by yourself now?
Giving the diagram, sir.
Giving the diagram, yes, from the diagram.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, don't forget this. Why is this here now? Can somebody tell me why this star is here?
The accepting state.
Except
Accepting state.
Good, because they are accepting state. So that's that. Then the next thing is, how do we now remove the null? Now, all this big English, we are going to explain it, but just let's look at it. Now, we look across the table from B to the column, to the lambda column, where we find C, D, right? So if you look at this, you can see the initial state doesn't have what? A portion, anything under lambda. So it is not considered as the first, but the first guy that has something that is connected with lambda is what we now start considering, right? For the purpose of removing the null. So it says we look across the table from B to the lambda column where we find CD. Now, if we are in state B, reading a 1. Now, let's go back. If we are in state B, reading a 1 may seem impossible, but let's look at this diagram. We are in state B. Reading a 1 may seem impossible, right? But we can make use of that 1 by going non-deterministically to C, right? So we can move from C non-deterministically to C, from B to C, then make use of our 1 going back to B, right? Or we could also move non-deterministically to C and move to D again, then make use of our 1 to come back to C. Don't worry, you can see you are quiet. I'm just making a point, but it's important. So if we are in state B, reading a 1, we could use the 1 directly from B, though in this case, there is no appropriate transition. Or we could first move by the lambda to either C, which has a lambda on it, an empty set on it, or we move to D and then use the 1 given to us. That's what I just explained by visiting the diagram. Now, so, okay, let me bring the diagram so that we can understand quickly. Here. So look at this. We are at, where are we? Okay. Now this is A, this is B. This is B. Now you can see there's no how we can read 1 here because there's no arrow leaving it that represents 1. But because it's a non-deterministic automaton, we could use this lambda to jump to C and make use of our 1. This is 1 here now. This is 1. We could use this lambda to go to C, this lambda here to go to C, then make use of our 1. Or we could also use this lambda to move to B, to move to C, then move to D and make use of the 1. So that is possible. And that's why it is important that we learn how to remove the null, right? So the set of states we could move to is gotten by taking the union of the 3 sets in 1 column of B, C, and D rows combined. Now, this is empty set of file union B, union C, which gives us BC for 0th column. That's the column under 0, where we get E union file, which just gives us E. So taking the union of BCD row under 0 and 1, then we can get the solution we actually look for. So okay, let me explain now. Now, how do we go? Now here, look at this diagram. The first guy that has a value under lambda is what? B. So we write down B, C, D. So in order to know how we can use, if we have a 1 sent to us, how we can use it, we'll now combine everything, all the input, this is under B, C, and D. So here we have the row for B is what? You have E under 0, under 1, we have nothing, then under lambda, you have what? C, D, right? The next one is C. Under C, we have, under C, we have nothing here, then under here, we have B, right? Then D. Then under D, we have C under 1. So, I'm coming. Let me move to that diagram again. So my battery is about to die in case you call me. What time is it that your battery is dying? Is there no light on campus? Have they not fixed the electricity on campus? Oh boy. Okay, so okay, let me just move this guy here so that it will be easy for us to explain. So here. Now look at, oh, no light. Oh, sorry to hear that. So even if we're in class, there won't be like power supply soon. So look at this. We have we want to look at the union of B, C, and D. So we write out what makes up B, what makes up C, and what makes up D under 0, 1, and lambda. Look at B here. This is B, and this is what we have put here. This is C, and that's what we have put here. And this is D. Where is D? Is what we have put here. So taking the union, we have E, that's taking it from downwards. And here we have B, C. And because we are trying to remove the lambda, we look at the input for B will now be what? E under 0 and BC under 1. And that's what we have written here. Do you understand, or do I repeat myself? Hello?
Please, I repeat.
All right. Now, I said we want to remove the null. That is one of the procedure of converting a non-deterministic finite state automaton to a finite state automaton. So how do we go about removing the null? The first thing is that we convert the diagram to a state table, which I've explained, right? Then the next thing is that we look out for where the first value appears under lambda. And here it appears under what? B, on state B. So how do we remove the null? This null is what we want to remove, right? So how do we go about it? Now, you look at B, state B as CD in the lambda section, and that's what you want to remove. So you bring out B, and it has CD under lambda, CD under lambda, right? So in order to get out this lambda, you take the union of everything that B, C, and D has. So here you have B having E under 0, having nothing under 1, and CD under lambda, right? Then C has nothing, has B, and has D under lambda. Then D under 0, nothing, under 1, C, and under lambda, nothing. So when you want to find a union, you know what union is? Union is finding what is the same here. What do they have in common? So here they have what? E. They have file, that's empty, file. So in all, what you have is just E. Then the next one, you look at what do these people have in common? What they have in common is what? File, union what? B, union what? C. So you have B, C under what? 1. So under 0, you have E. Under 1, you have BC. So this is what we want to cancel out. So there's no need to find what is their union, right? So you now come up with, for the new value of B, you have what? B under 0, E under 1, BC. So we want to remove this guy. So you look at the next one that has value under lambda is what? C, right? So you write C, and what does it have? It has D. So you bring the two of them together. What does C and D have? So C, D, right? This is C, and this is D. C has what? Under 0, and under 1 under lambda. So C has nothing. Then under 1, it has B, right? And under lambda, it has D. Then D has nothing under 0, nothing under 0, has C under 1, and has nothing under lambda. So finding the union here, you have nothing here. Then here is what? B, C. So you write C under 0 as what? Nothing. Then under C as under 1 as what? B, C. I'm not sure. Am I correct? Yes, it's correct. Now the next one that has lambda is what? E. So you look at E, you bring E out, and F, right? Then E, you see you have E, it has F. So bringing E and F out, so this is E, right? And this is F. Under 0, under 1, under lambda. So E under 0 is what? Nothing. Then E under 1 is what? C, D. Then under lambda is what? F. F is what? D under 0 and nothing under the others. So when you find the union of this column, you have D under 0 and C, D under 1. So the new value of E now becomes what? D under 0 and C, D under 1. Do you understand up to this point?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
let's look at the whole diagram and what sorry, let me clear this. So all we have done is this. So here we have the original diagram, and this is what it has been converted to. By finding the union of BCD, by finding the union of BCD, we arrive at what? BC. By finding the union of C and D, we arrive at BC. Finding the union of EF, we find DCF, just as I've just explained to you before now. Okay, so this is how to remove the null. So I just showed you the working of how to get the null. So this is the initial table that we drew from the diagram, and this is the new table without the null. So this is one of the process of removing the null, right? Now, the next thing is combining multiple transition. How do we combine multiple transition? Well, I think most of you are already complaining of battery or something. So who is this, Julius? Yes, Julius, your hand is raised. You can speak.
Yes.
I can't hear you.
I'll just ask a question, sir.
Yes,
I'll ask a question, sir. Okay, so I don't know, how did B become an accepting state, sir?
How what?
How did B become an accepting state after the union?
I didn't get what you said. How did what become what?
How did B become an accepting state?
How did B? Okay, how did B become an accepting state?
Yes, sir.
How did B become an? Okay, now he said how did B? This is the diagram, right? This one. So how is B having an accepting state here? I'm coming. How is this one having accepting state, right?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Okay, good. Now, once you are doing your processing, like you are doing your union, maybe B, you remember that this is B, you have E. Okay, this is B, you have C, D. Now, during your process, when you are finished processing, you have an element of what? E. And remember that from, sorry, let me take you to that diagram. From here, you can see that this guy, E, and what? C are accepting states. So if during your union, you have an accepting state being unionized with you, then you become an accepting state automatically. So you see this E gives this guy the benefits. You see this C gives this guy the benefits. But anyone that we didn't tamper with, we didn't tamper with A. We didn't tamper with A, right? We didn't tamper with, did we tamper with D, right? And we didn't tamper with D. So any of them may not have that privilege of becoming an accepting state. Now, if you look at this guy here, it has a C, but because we didn't do any union for it, it cannot be an accepting state. But for others that have some union, this is E and this is C, so it qualifies to be an accepting state. Now, C, you see C is an accepting state, like you have C in the combination, so it has this. Then the next one, you have D, C. C is an accepting state, so it comes with that property of accepting state with it because it has been unionized, it has been married during the process of union taking. So that's why we have them to be, what's the name? Having accepting states in front of them. Do you get that?
Yes, sir.
Please, they say not really. Okay, you meet your classmates who understand. So, where did we stop again? So I think this is where we stop. Now, I observed that some of you are saying battery low. So we have just 12 pages to run. So probably we'll fix a supplementary class to finish that. So I think it's just this point that's combining multiple transition. So once we are done with that, then we can now take a defining example to look at it holistically. So this where, so you know how to construct the table. You can complete the null. We have looked at removing the null. Then we look at removing multiple transition, which we have not done. We have looked at equivalence. It's still the same thing. We have looked at standard form. So this is the only point that we have not done. So we'll just look for maybe a few minutes to look at it in a supplementary class, right? So that we can just have the whole thing sorted out. So because of, I don't want you guys to miss out, I'm going to stop here. So we have 12 more pages to look at. And we now look at the processes, general process in one example of converting from non-deterministic finite state automaton to a finite state automaton. So can we have a time? Can we agree on a time that is convenient? 2 hands raised. Who are these ones raising up their hands? Yes. Julius, I think I've attended to you. Lawrence, yes, Lawrence.
Yeah, so the assignment you gave, not
Mhm.
quite long. There's no the diagram. There's no accept states, or there are no accepted states. It's just I think 21. Or
It's just what?
yeah, okay. It's like 20. 20s are not this, sir.
Is it not this guy?
No, sir.
Slide 20.
20.
Yeah.
So you did not include. You said we should draw the diagram.
And if there's no accept states included, then that means you should not include accept states.
Okay. Okay, sure.
All right. So, any other questions? So, when should we have a class? Is the class rep still on, or she has been logged out? Maybe in the evening, if you have the time in the evening. So just not today, because I'm also tired. I've been working for the past 3 weeks non-stop. Hello. What time is convenient for you guys so that we just finish? Or do you go and read it all by yourself? I've been locked out, so why are people not talking?
So we can decide, we can hold a poll in our, on our group chat and decide, make a decision on where to, hold the class. So we can
Oh, okay.
I take a vote.
All right. So when am I going to get that response?
So you get it from Peace, I don't know when, so.
Peace has
That's
been locked out. I think maybe our battery is low. Okay, so I'll get a response from you. But from next week, Dr. Sanaki will be taking your class. So I don't know if he's going to make it physical or online, but I think he wants to make it physical. So please, you have to be in class next week, physical class. So Dr. Sanaki will address you on the modality for going on with the class. So I hope the class has been instructive enough, and I hope I've been able to impact you a bit, right? And it's not easy teaching. It takes a lot of strength and effort. I am paid to lecture, but yes, Lawrence, you have your hand raised.
So, sir, please, I have a question, sir.
Speak.
So for the NFA, I understand that